Hi everybody. Today we'll be discussing about our work of real-time detection of plant diseases using aerial robots and deep learning techniques. I'm Siddhant and I'll be presenting on behalf of our entire robotics lab. So coming to the problem statement, we know that agricultural plays a pivotal role in providing sustenance to the entire human population. Especially in developing countries like India, it forms the backbone of the economy because a majority of which in our case is about 55% depend on it as the primary source of income. So what are the challenges that agriculture generally faces? It faces multiple challenges like irrigation control, detection of plant and pest. It also can be soil enrichment testing, which needs to be done at periodic cycles. But one of the major concerns in agricultural yield productivity, or which affects that so much, is the detection of plant and pest diseases. Traditionally, what happens is, if in case we are able to find out the early prediction as well as prevention of such diseases, it can yield to an increase in the agricultural productivity. Traditionally, the identification of plant diseases is normally done by visual inspection, but this technique is dependent on the skill or ability of the farmer. Depending upon the ability of the farmer to detect the disease, he or she will identify the disease and try to uh, have a particular pest control techniques implemented on the plants, but this technique or this solution can be time consuming, cumbersome, as well as inefficient. But interestingly, few of these challenges can be addressed by the use of computer vision as well as deep learning techniques, and hence we try to identify or implement such techniques in case of an agricultural scenario. So what is the plant that we are targeting, and which disease are we trying to identify from it? So in our case, we are trying to identify the Papaya Ring Spot Virus, which is normally called as PRSV, on the papaya plant. And why the papaya plant? Because being in the tropical subclimatical region, papaya is an important subcrop which is grown in India because of its nutritional value. And as we have found that the incidence of papaya ring spot virus has a majority of about 50% incidence in all of the states of tropical lying in the tropical regions in India. And how do we classify such a disease? We, in consultation with pathologists as well as scientists, did try to identify that all of these diseases can be classified into four different stages, which is the initial stage, the intermediate stage, as well as the final stage. So you can see here that first is the healthy leaf of the papaya plant, which in the initial stages of the papaya ring spot virus do have yellow spots or blisters formations on it, which is the initial stage. It transitions to the intermediate stage where the blisters grow in size and leads to the color change in the entire leaf, and then transitions into the final stage where we have shoestringing of the entire leaf and ring spot formation on the fruits as well. So what's the novelty of our approach? What we try to do in this entire stage is we first have a data acquisition technique both from the handheld devices as well as the mobile aerial platform which is flying overhead, and we found that existing literature does not classify these two dataset and does not try to distinguish on how deep learning techniques behave differently on these two datasets. So once we have a data acquisition set ready, we do try to make a custom dataset by augmenting this information by increase the richness of the collected data. To try to split them in the 80-20 ratio for analyzing different deep learning architectures that we have, and also testing the sample payload setup and implement that on an aerial mobile platform on the validation dataset. Finally, we showcase the result that we have got from our work. So the novelty of the work are as follows. We try to find out a comprehensive study of different deep learning frameworks in order to identify the real-time diseases at various stages. We do try to propose a methodology which puts in embedded devices which can work in real time, integrate them in mobile aerial setups so that the entire methodology can work in an agricultural scenario in a real time, or we can make the decisions on the go. Finally, we do try to demonstrate the potential of the mobile aerial platform and do also have conducted field surveys in order to find what challenges do we face while implementing such a setup in real-time scenarios. So coming to the analysis of the deep learning architectures that we have found, we do try to consider 4 different types of algorithms, which in our case are noted over here. We do try to consider the YOLO V3 standard algorithm, which are compared with the lightweight from frameworks, which is the tiny MobileNet V2 as well as YOLO fastest. And the entire training procedure is carried out in the Google Collaboratory platform. And this selection is because of the fact that irrespective of the capabilities of the host machine, the training can try to harness the capabilities of the GPU and TPU on the Google Collaboratory platforms. The entire training was carried out for about 6,000 epochs or training cycles, where we had a training dataset of 2,250 images, where 2,000 were collected from the handheld images and 250 were from the aerial setups. We can see that initially the training loss starts from a higher value, and over the training iterations it reduces to about 0 for about 3,000 to 4,000 iterations. In comparison of the different evaluation metrics, we find that the standard YOLO V3 network has a less mean average precision in comparison to the lightweight frameworks. Also, in comparison to the loss, we find that YOLO has a greater loss in comparison to the lightweight frameworks, and also the lightweight frameworks can guarantee a detection speed of 3 times in comparison to the standard YOLO V3 framework. We also find out that in comparison of all of these setups, the mobile net V2 YOLO V3 setup finds its or proves its superiority because of a comparable mean average precision, less less loss after the training iterations, and a higher detection speed. We also did try to conduct the same training for both of these setups, that is the handheld images as well as the aerial imagery setups that you can see over here, and you can see that the convergence of the training loss happens a bit faster in the handheld image dataset in comparison to the aerial imagery dataset, and you can also see that the MAP is less in comparison to the handheld dataset. The loss is more as well as the detection speed is less, and this is because of the fact that in a single frame of the aerial imagery dataset there are a lot of it entails a lot of detections that needs to be found out, and because of the number of increase in the detection in a single frame, the detection time or the inference time increases, and hence the loss also increases, leading to a reduction in the mean average precision. So after analyzing these algorithms, the next step was to find out how can we implement that all of this entire computational framework in our setup. So considering that we have evaluated the best computational framework, which in our case is MobileNet V2 YOLO V3, how do we validate that on the validation setup? So we did try to check it on the validation setup, and as you can see over here, the algorithm is pretty capable of detecting the healthy leaves, which is in the second video, and distinguish it from the Papaya Ring Spot Virus, which is present on the left side video. So after consulting with the horticulture scientists as well as pathologists, they suggested us, rather than detecting the disease which is demonstrated in figure or in the video 3, can you try to distinguish between the different stages of the diseases? Rather, which is, can you try to distinguish the initial stage, the intermediate stage, as well as the final stage, which will involve different pest control techniques or different plant disease control techniques associated with it. So in the fourth video, you can see that we were able to categorize these plant diseases according to their stages as well. So you can see that the yellow coloring leaf, which is in the intermediate stage, and towards the left we will have a leaf stringing phenomenon, which is much more or less present in the final stages, which is also being getting detected. And our major findings from this was the detection of different stages of the disease was well capable enough in order to be founded when we are using dataset from handheld images, because they provided much more features which were extracted, and the algorithms work better on the handheld image dataset in comparison to the UAV payload dataset. But uh, the main focus of our project was to demonstrate the ability of a sample payload setup in order to carry out the onboard object detection in order to classify the plant-based diseases. So in order to do that, we did try to build a laboratory setup in order to set up or simulate the entire agricultural scenarios, Here you can see that in the payload setup, we have an onboard Jetson Nano, which is connected to the Raspberry Pi V2 camera, which is trying to capture the entire video portrayed on the LCD screen. The onboard computer is trying to make detections based on the deep learning architecture running over it, which is transmitted by the Wi-Fi adapter to the ground control station, which is showing the detections are recorded by the onboard setup. You can see that there is a slight lag between both of these setups, and the second finding is it's very much capable enough in order to find or distinguish the healthy leaves from the papaya ring spot affected leaves. But there is a slight lag. This is because of the fact that the number of inferences go up in a video incorporating the mobile aerial setup, and this lag was already discussed in the validation setups or in the training stages that we discussed earlier. So after uh, finding out or demonstrating the utility of the sample payload setup, the next thing was we do try to demonstrate or integrate that with a mobile aerial setup and proves its effectiveness in a real-time agricultural scenario. So you can see over here that we were able to successfully implement the mobile aerial setup with the payload sample payload, which consists of a deep learning architecture running over it and running on the sample videos which are recorded on the go. And you can see that the results are the results are pretty satisfactory, where we are able to detect the affected plants from the healthy plants. So you can see that this was the experimental setup that we did try to form. This was the sample payload. The sample payload had a weight of about 446.2 grams, was able to be accommodated within 10 cross 6 cross 4 centimeter cube space, making it efficient enough to be mounted as a sample payload of the mobile aerial robot. This was a ground control station where we just connected the sample payload with the peripherals, and this was the mobile aerial setup, which had an endurance of about 20 to 25 minutes based on what modalities we mounted on the robot. And one of the major conclusions that we had on in such a study was, as you can see over here, that when we mounted the sample payload on the mobile aerial robot with an increase in the ground sampling distance, there was an increase in the inference time also. You can see that the methodology perfectly works in this video, but because of the fact that the number of detections increase with an increase in the ground sampling distance, the mean average precision, the training loss also were affected, and hence there was a lag in the real-time footage and the footage which was detected from the onboard setup. But this lag can be considered as a trade-off, because we were able to provide real-time feedback or real-time detections to the farmers or to the end users, which was not possible earlier. So we would like to conclude this work of ours by thanking Professor Ashugan Thondiat, who supported us in this entire journey, by thanking the farmers of Bijapur and Bagalkot, as well as the pathologists, as well as the horticulture scientists, who made sure that we had guidance, support, as well as were kept motivated throughout this entire journey, where we wanted to bring a change by the field of robotics as well as computer vision. So we would definitely like to hear how we can improve our work, and a big thanks to all of you. Thank you all.